Okay, first of all, good morning. I want to thank you all for once again joining me. I am proud to be standing here with our Commissioner of Health, Dr. Patricia Ruppert, and our County Attorney, Tom Humbeck. I've asked you here today to update you on the announcement we made last week regarding new orders that our Commissioner of Health would be drafting to keep people who may have been exposed to the measles in their homes and away from public places. But before we get into the details, I feel it's necessary to address what is being said by some people about the actions here in Rockland County. What is the standard that would apply to this situation? To be told that we should wait for someone to die because of this disease is absolutely beyond belief. Should we wait for hundreds more people to also fall ill? We declared a state of emergency 3 weeks ago to prevent illness from spreading, to encourage vaccination, and to protect the health and safety of our residents, especially those who are unable to be vaccinated and protect themselves due to age, pregnancy, or being immunocompromised. This is our 29th week fighting the measles outbreak here in Rockland, the longest lasting current outbreak in the entire nation, and the largest outbreak in New York State in 30 years. Despite our best efforts, this outbreak is not going away. If anything, it is now accelerating, much as we feared. We have seen 33 new cases since we declared our now nullified state of emergency 3 weeks ago. In short, we saw this coming. We timed our declaration because we, not the court, recognize the confluence of many events, including the upcoming Easter and Passover holy days. This concern was recently affirmed by Chief Rabbi Pinchas Goldschmidt, the president of the Conference of European Rabbis. In short, we were ahead of the crisis, but our efforts have been hamstrung by recent court rulings. The fact of the matter is that we have had 5 cases go to intensive care units, including 1 infant. Need we wait for someone to die? It is grotesque that measurement has somehow seeped into this debate, even within our own court system. Many emergency declarations, often preventative in nature, have been issued where no one has died or even been injured, for snowstorms and for hurricanes. We even had one after Hurricane Sandy that limited your purchase of gasoline to 10 gallons of fill-up. Even the governor has utilized this emergency declaration under New York State executive law option for situations far less critical than a public health emergency. I would submit to the people of Rockland that what we are going through now is much, much worse. To say we are overreaching flies in the face of fact, history, and the most important, common sense. The impact of this outbreak in direct cost and the perception of this county as it relates to the economy is going to be massive if this outbreak is not halted. We use an example, an outbreak in Brooklyn in 2013, where 58 cases of measles were confirmed and resulted in tracking over 3,300 potentially exposed people and an expenditure of about $400,000. Using the same rule that we're looking nearly here today, we are looking at nearly quadruple that cost, and a cost that may approach $2 million. And to put a reality check on that, $2 million is approximately equivalent to a 2% county property tax hike. Not to mention the costs that are inherent in the hospitalizations of people that we have seen get sick and be hospitalized due to this disease. The worst of this right now is that we are seeing defeat snatched from the jaws of victory. Dr. Ruppert will detail the successes we have had by methodically addressing this outbreak, and to defer, deter, or delay our efforts will set us back and infect many that would have never contracted this disease. To what end is that supposed logic going to work? It is unacceptable to sit back and do nothing as more of our residents fall ill to this deadly disease and court decisions aside. We will never do that. In 2017, measles killed 110,000 people worldwide, mostly children under the age of 5. And while we have thankfully not seen a death here yet, in Rockland we have seen multiple hospitalizations, including an infant and even a premature birth caused by measles. An infant. Exactly what our concerns were expressed more than once before the court actions. This is not the mildhood childhood disease that those in the anti-vax community make it out to be. This is not fever and a rash. That is ridiculous. The dangers and complications of measles far outweigh any of the extremely unlikely side effects of the vaccine itself. Given those circumstances, I plan to renew Rockland's state of emergency when it expires on April 25th, in the place of an emergency order related to that declaration of emergency, which I am permitting to expire. We are putting into place the Health Department program that Dr. Ruppert will discuss fully here today. Because of this current restraining order, we are unable to enforce the provisions of our state of emergency. And you will recall, we don't have a problem with that. We never had an intention to arrest anybody. We were just basically stating that we're putting the authority of law behind it to get people's attention and get them vaccinated. And we have seen progress on that front, with 18,718 vaccinations given as of April 15th, up 1,760 since we made our announcement 3 weeks ago. This is a success we're having despite being hamstrung by court decisions. While that is the most recent number provided to us by the state, it likely is higher, and it is inclusive of every vaccine thus far given. The state database that tracks immunizations, the New York State Immunization Information System, gives doctors a 14-day window to input their numbers. We will be back in court arguing the case concerning the Green Meadow Waldorf School later this week. But in the meantime, we are taking further definitive action. That includes the deployment of additional resources and personnel, along with the continuance of the Health Department order that schools in the 10952 and the 10977 zip codes, which have received orders from the Commissioner, must continue to exclude unvaccinated, non-immune students and turn over to the Department of Health all requested attendance and vaccination records. That has not changed. We also want to take a moment to thank all the schools that have cooperated here. Their efforts have gone a long way towards preventing even more cases from occurring, and Dr. Ruppert will speak to that also. Dr. Ruppert, in consultation with our Department of Law, has issued new guidelines that will be used moving forward in dealing with our measles outbreak. In short, my administration will not be deterred from my sacred responsibility to protect the health of all in this county. We will never while we will defer to the court, we will never be deterred from doing what needs to be done for the people of Rockland County. I'm going to introduce Dr. Ruppert. She will detail this initiative further and also review some of the successes we have had for one reason and one reason only. Our health department and my administration has been able to do their jobs without interference. With that, I'll introduce Dr. Ruppert. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We have 186 cases of confirmed measles in Rockland County, with many more that are unreported at this time. We have 84.4% of them have been diagnosed in those who are 18 years of age and under. There have been no deaths associated with this outbreak, thankfully, although there have been many complications, including multiple hospitalizations and 5 admissions to the intensive care unit, as Mr. Day has mentioned. The Rockland County Department of Health has redoubled its effort to combat this measles outbreak. Our previous efforts included education and community outreach, which are ongoing, as well as my previous school exclusions that have led to great compliance and great progress in getting people vaccinated. I have 100% compliance with those schools that I have required to give me the weekly exclusion lists, as well as the affirmations and the list of students. These approaches have led to the 18,718 MMR vaccines that have been administered to date in this county. I want to thank those schools and within the community who have supported our efforts to contain this outbreak. So I have a couple of new initiatives that we're using to redouble our efforts. So the first one is the Rockland County Department of Health Communicable Disease and Exposure Exclusion Order, which is a commissioner's order. There are 3 components to this. This excludes the individual who has the measles to remain home until no longer infectious. It also requires those exposed to measles to be excluded from indoor and outdoor places of public assembly located in Rockland County for a specified period of time from the date of the order. The individual is prohibited from going out or being present at any place of public assembly for the period of time that is determined, with exceptions for medical care, emergency situations, and court appointments. Individuals are required to cooperate with Rockland County Department of Health public health authorities by providing information regarding details of one's illness, exposures, and contacts. The violations include those $2,000 per violation per day. So my focus now will be on the children. As I mentioned, over 84% of cases in those have occurred in 18 years of age and under. And this order will be given to the parents of the children who are responsible for the child. Parents and guardians served with this order on behalf of an exposed minor are responsible for compliance of their child. The second effort involves students who are required to have proper MMR immunizations and to date have not demonstrated that the vaccines have been administered. There is a state law which requires mandatory immunizations to be able to attend school, unless the student has a medical or religious exemption. Yet many students, even in schools that have achieved the 95% vaccination rate, have not yet been immunized. This has to change. I have the authority from the State Commissioner of Health to exclude those children who are not up to date on their immunizations. With this outbreak, I am implementing further exclusions of students without evidence of proper MMR vaccination, and that's effective immediately. This is addressed to the school administrators and to the principals. This Commissioner's order includes, pursuant to an audit conducted by the New York State Department of Health and/or the Rockland County Department of Health, students have been identified as having neither a valid certificate of immunization on file for the MMR vaccine or laboratory evidence of immunity against all three, measles, mumps, and rubella, nor a valid medical or religious exemption on file. And I purposely want to remind you that it's all three, measles, mumps, and rubella, that are required by state law, and we will implement for all three. I'm requiring a notarized affidavit sworn under penalty of perjury, or if unable to take an oath, a notarized affirmation affirmed under penalties of perjury that identify students who have been excluded from the school or daycare according to this order. Failure to comply will result in $2,000 fine per violation per day. And this Commissioner's order related to the schools is being delivered as we are meeting here this morning. Measles. Once again, educational efforts are vital. Vaccine is preventable. But I'll remind you all, it's a highly contagious disease that causes pneumonia, encephalitis, which is swelling of the brain, and death. Thankfully, we've seen no deaths. We hope we don't. Measles is easily preventable with our safe and effective MMR vaccine. Newborns, pregnant individuals, and those with weakened immune systems can't get vaccinated. So it's important that everyone around them become vaccinated to protect them from contracting the virus that has serious complications. And while the MMR vaccine is the safest and most effective method of preventing measles, it is 97% effective. We don't have 100% effective anything. So with our 97%, which is wonderful, we have to have population-wide immunity, and that's a key component to protecting those who are most at risk. I just want to read you something that I read early this morning. In Madagascar, there have been 115,000 cases of measles. 1,200 people have died. While an anti-vaccination movement has led to new cases in the United States, that's not a major factor in Madagascar. Those parents really want to immunize their children, but they don't have the resources to do so. In the United States, we have the resources. Our MMRs are free during this outbreak. We have administered, as I mentioned, over 18,000, almost 19,000 MMR vaccines to date. That's what we need. We need more people to be vaccinated. We need our entire community to be vaccinated. Once again, I'll remind everyone, if you don't know your immune status, to please check. It's still time. There's still time to do so. And again, vaccine is the way to go. We'll take questions if you have.
One second. First of all, before we take questions, I want to acknowledge Dr. Ruppert and the staff of our county and our state health departments. They have done highly meritorious work and service to this county, and the amount of it's really difficult to even put in words how much they deserve to be commended. I want to make that public statement. But more importantly, right now, in closing, I want to leave something with the people of Rockland, and that is the following: we will not quit. We will not take a back seat when it comes to their health. We will use every tool at our disposal and do so regardless of opposition or distractions. That is what our responsibility here is in county government, and we will conquer the challenge that presently is in front of us. With that, we can take questions.
So there's no longer a 95% school exclusion. It's now just if you don't have MMR and if you don't have the MMR vaccine and you have unless you have a medical exemption, you cannot go to school.
So what we're doing is you're right, we're looking at those schools who have 95% or approaching 95% to start with. And at this time, I have 16 schools in that group. And there are schools in that group who have complete 100% compliance with the students who don't have exemptions. So they're fine, they achieved what they needed to do. Mm-hmm. But for those schools that still have outstanding MMRs that need to be administered, those are the schools we're contacting.
So basically anyone with maybe a religious exemption. So they're now
No,
not
religious
exempted.
and medical exemptions are carved out. So you have a school with 95% vaccination rate. Say they have 5 students with medical and or religious exemptions. We carve them out. We only count the students who can get the MMR vaccine. Of those students, if they have received the MMR, everyone's up to date by state law. They should have been up to date in September before the outbreak began. They can continue in school. They've got their 95%, so it still does matter. But for schools that have, even though they have achieved the 95% and they have students in those seats who don't have the proper immunization, those are the students that need to be excluded until they get them. That's state law. We're implementing it here.
But technically those kids have been in school. For now, potentially, because
Right.
right. But now they
Certainly,
can no longer go to school.
Right. They were there right before even the outbreak.
Robert.
These are schools just in the 105.2 and the 109.77?
Yes.
This isn't a county-wide.
Just in the geographic area, as you mentioned, the zip codes.
So I'm not entirely clear on how it differed from the previous order that you had in for those 2 zip codes.
We had stated that the 95% vaccination rate would allow children to go back to school. At that time, I did not have the information that I have now, which is that there are a number of students in most of the schools that have not achieved their immunizations. So those are the students now that I'm looking at. I didn't have that information weeks ago. Now that I have it, we're going to look at those students and say, you need to be out until you get it. So it is different in that regard.
The difference is the 95%, the schools that had reached 95%, they weren't involved in your original order. But now, even schools that have reached 95%, they are involved in this order. Is that?
Any school now that, in this region, this is where we can start, okay, that has children in the school who are not otherwise exempt need to have their MMRs. I did not have, until the audits, I didn't have the specific information on the student list of who had the MMRs and who didn't. Now I have by name who had them. The audits were very helpful, and I've only gotten that information most recently.
All right, so just to follow up on that, from a practical perspective, how do you track these kids and then keep them from going to public places?
Which order are you talking about? The first order? The one with the parents that are responsible, or the school?
You're saying you can't go to public places. How do you track these kids, and then how do you make sure they don't go to public places?
If we have students who are out of school and we become aware that we know that they're not immune, they're not up to date, and we find out that they are out in public, we will move forward for the parents. We will then address the parents in that regard. If it's someone who we state that must be home, they're required to be home because they had an exposure or because they have the measles and we find out they're out, that would be the parents that would be responsible. For the second order, I know we have the 2 today, we will be looking at the school administrators, that they shouldn't be in school.
I'm sorry, so do you get the names from the schools? How are you coming up with these names?
Every Friday, I have a list that's that I mentioned. We have 100% compliance to date. I have the list of all the school students who are excluded from each school.
So you know the kids who don't have the vaccination?
Yes, I do. Now I do.
Sir?
I think Peter answered my question about the exclusion order, how you're able to attract people who have been exposed and make sure that they're staying home. I mean, that's certainly why children are in school, but it's also branching that out to adults.
Okay, Sarah. Again, the doctor laid out how we find out who is in the situation.
School students.
Right. So we will find that out. We will take the necessary steps to identify and to serve the order upon the people affected. As far as where they go and what they do afterwards, again, we had the same discussion last time with the emergency order. As far as the enforcement piece, there is a certain amount of reality to this. We are giving them direction. We're citing a law, and we're saying you cannot leave under penalty of $2,000 per day for violation. Now, if you choose to leave and go out, you risk that, number one. Number two, there's something called liability. If you are under a directive of the Health Commission not to go out and you infect someone, or if you're part of a situation that people get infected, you have liability issues. So again, there's no absolute here. We're not here, as I said last time when we had the criminal sanction or the penal law sanction that was part of the emergency order. We're not out there searching for people, arresting people, having cops go out. That's not what it's about. What it's about is re-emphasizing to the people of Rockland, this is serious, and it's now the law. And when people hear that, they tend to go along with the law. That's just the reality of the people we run into. And I will just point out that we are now approaching the 19,000 MMR vaccines, I think 1,700 or so since the declaration was declared. So people are paying attention. People are complying. Will we have 100% compliance? Is somebody going to go outside? We can't stop everything. And this is not unlike you can't stop all crime in any area. You'll stop most of the things going on. It's just a practical issue.
Second row and then Tony.
Mr. Day, you mentioned moving forward, potential massive impact is the way that you described it. Can you just sort of flesh that out? I mean, illustrate what that would look like, what the massive impact would look like.
Well, right now, we've had 30-some-odd cases over the past couple of weeks, 3 weeks now, since the emergency declaration, as I mentioned earlier. We're at 186 right now. It's an upward trajectory. And you recall that we expressed concern when we announced the emergency declaration that there was a change in trajectory. You saw a bit of a change, a bit of an uptick, and we also saw increase in exposures. We also were running into more obstinance by people not telling us where they were, which from my perspective is even worse, because all we're doing, we're not asking idle questions. What we're trying to find out is, where were you? Because this disease is highly contagious. It can last on a surface for up to 2 hours. People who are not protected are at risk. Babies, pregnant women, people who've won their battle against cancer, and now they have to deal with the issue of potential measles. So those things we saw, and the confluence of the the holy days coming up, those things came together, and I made the decision. This is on my shoulders, to move forward with an emergency declaration. That is what I believe was the right thing to do, and I still believe is the right thing to do. That has been distracted now a bit by the court action, which we are going to appeal, but in the interim, we're taking alternate action designed to get this job done. To do any less is a failure to the people of this county. As to specifically numbers, you see what's happening now. You see the increasing trajectory of numbers. When you start looking at that, you can basically draw your own extrapolation of how many it could be. We're trying to stop that.
Tony?
The emergency order of March 26th referred to indoor places. You're now adding outdoor places to the Commissioner's order. Can you tell us why?
We're doing everything we can to try to minimize the impact of this disease. What it means is that when we say to a parent, you need to keep your child home. Your child was exposed to the measles, therefore, please keep that child home for 21 days. Or if the child has measles, and most of them are too ill to really go out. But if they do take the child out, 4 days before the rash, they don't always know. 4 days after the rash, once that rash develops, and if we find out in time and require that, tell them that, and they take them out, and we find out, then the parent is responsible, because we know that child is communicable during that time.
And how do you define exposed to measles?
Someone is in a space where a non-immune person, where they can become the recipient of droplet spread, either in the air or in the contact, from contact surfaces. And we determine that as we do the contact investigation.
So would that be someone who had gone into, say, one of the retail establishments where you knew that people had gone?
Potentially.
Okay.
Potentially.
And, two last questions, and thank you for your patience.
Sure.
The jump of measles to Michigan that we heard about today, 40 cases, 1 man had gone from Brooklyn. What does that say about the dangers we're looking at here? And secondly, what is your concern that this is going to jump from the ultra-Orthodox community to the wider Rockland community?
So I'll answer the second question first, and we've always been concerned about that. We all shop in many of the same stores. We are one community in Rockland County, small geographic area, as you know. So from the beginning, I've been asking everyone to check their immune status. If they're unsure, check with their doctor, get an MMR vaccine if they can and do need it. We're doing what we can for all community outreach in every single area of the community, in the insular community, the religious community, as well as the wider community of Rockland County. We are one Rockland County, and we don't look to a particular group in a way that would be negative to them. We look to them to try to minimize the impact of this disease, to end this outbreak, to work together. And truthfully, I'll mention again, we've had very good cooperation for the most part.
Can you say something, Pat?
Sure.
I just want to add one thing to that, to the observation. As Dr. Ruppert mentioned, this is a small geographical county. This is an issue for the entire county. People travel, they go from place to place. And I'll remind people that while this did commence within the ultra-Orthodox community, because 7 travelers from Israel came over to celebrate the High Holy Days in October. That's how it started. That's just a reality. The fact of the matter is, since then, people have traveled through the entire county. We've read reports of people going to different stores and things like that. So the issue is no longer simply a matter of one geographical area. Our orders are for other reasons. But the fact of the matter is, people are traveling. Anybody could be exposed and get sick. We have one school that we know of that we're engaged in litigation with. Those children, by and large, are not vaccinated. We have seen parents in public school system. The public school has been very, very good as it relates to their immunizations. But just looking at some media reports, we've seen occasional few parents who chose, not for religious reasons, not for a medical exemption. They just felt they didn't want the kids to get a shot now, and they were allowed to do it. That's what the most vexing part is. Absent the documentation that is required under state education department law, there are children who are not vaccinated. So that young person goes to the store with mom, who may be immune for a variety of reasons, and that young person gets sick. And again, it's not limited to one area. We have focused our efforts largely in one area because that is where it started, and it's really no more than that at this point.
Can you just tell us the latest on the appeal? Have you filed the proper paperwork, and what's the next?
Okay, I'll bring up County Attorney Tom Humbeck.
How you doing? The appeal itself is filed. It's based on the papers that were filed last Friday. We are expecting opposition from the 2 groups of petitioners that are that brought the case in the first place. With respect to the action before Judge Thorson here in Rockland County Supreme Court, we will be filing a response to that petition either today or tomorrow, and I'll have to leave it for the filing before I comment on it.
So if you were to file or issue a new commissioner's order like the previous one, it doesn't, this appeal or this, the injunction that was put in place doesn't affect the new one that you could potentially put in place, is that correct?
That is correct.
So that may have answered on Friday.
We have 2 court dates, just to clarify. The original petition by the students from Green Meadow, as well as by the Jane Doe petitioner before Judge Thorson in Rockland County Supreme Court, is presently returnable due on April 19th. That's Friday. So our response to those papers is due by Friday. We sought an interim appeal of the temporary restraining order before the appellate division, and while the emergency hearing on that continued the TRO, the more formal submission of papers is on April 18th, and our set of papers is already submitted on that. It went in the initial round, and we're waiting for the opposition.
And so why do you think that this won't be struck down, or?
This is a whole different authority of law that this is authorizing this action by the commissioner. It is a different theory of how to go about enforcement of the law. The emergency declaration is issued on a statute that does not have a lot of precedent and case law behind it. However, the powers of the Commissioner of Health to protect the public health are very strong and have been the subject of much precedent in the courts.
And you talked about a potential cost of up to $2 million. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, the cost of $2 million actually is lowball. We were looking at a case in Brooklyn, 2013, where we had only 58 infections. And with that infection, as Dr. Ruppert mentioned, there's a lot of work that comes with that. You have to go track down their contacts, potential exposure, and so forth and so on. The cost, the direct cost, and I'm very focused, the direct cost of that incident was about $400,000. We have triple and then some of cases right here. And we have over 3,300 people that we've had to track down and speak to. This all costs money, direct taxpayer money. And on top of that, we deal with two other issues. Number one, the issue of when we had 5 people hospitalized in intensive care units. 5. Anybody who's ever seen a hospital knows that's not going to be cheap. So there's indirect costs there that have to be borne by someone. And also the perception of Rockland County. We have made, and again, this is the last of the important issues. The most important issue is the health of people in this county. But we have gone through great strides to improve and make the vision of Rockland County positive. We have come back from a very difficult time here in Rockland, and with a lot of work, people are investing time, they're investing money, they're investing businesses. We have $7.5 billion more in ratables in Rockland County. That would not have happened when I took office in 2013 because we were nearly broke. Who would invest in a county that was going broke? And now we have something right now that, as important as for the media to be here to help us get the word out, and I thank you all for that. With this media exposure comes attention. That coverage does bring more attention to Rockland County, and it's not positive. So it is critically important that we address this crisis now as rapidly and effectively as we can, and that's exactly what we're doing. Because that will cost us money also.
Last question.
Tom, is there any precedent for, because with the legal challenges in Brooklyn, here, the federal court, is there any precedent for getting this very quickly to the New York State's highest court, the Court of Appeals, to figure out in the middle of a health emergency what the county executives and what the health commissioners can and can't do under New York law?
I would hope so, and I will encourage the court to do so if we have to go so far. But I don't make the rules for the court, and they set their own calendars.
You would like to see that, though?
If this matter had to continue, I'd like to do so rapidly.
Tony, we'd all like to see that. But again, what I want to emphasize is that we will re-strategize at every opportunity, regardless of whatever is thrown in front of us. That's just what we're going to do. And I want the people of Rockland to understand, while we can hope all we want that the courts move quickly, and I am hopeful that some of the things I brought to the attention of everybody here today will be questioned further as it relates to some of the logic you're hearing in the court system. We're going to do what we have to do regardless, because we have that responsibility. We cannot afford to wait around and wait for a court, which by definition, the judiciary has to weigh things and they will go over it and think about it. That's what they do. They're not designed to pivot and act like an executive branch of government. It's just the way it is. So we do wish we hope they find a way to get this done more quickly, but we are confident, based upon case law, of what the health commissioner is doing, and frankly, I'm confident in what I'm doing as far as under Executive Law 24. It may not have a lot of law behind it, but it's been used numerous times, including by the government of the state of New York, for really relatively minor things.
And can I just ask one more?
Yes, Rob.
Outside of the way you described what you're going to do in terms of identifying the children, how are you going to identify the adults, and how exactly will this order be delivered to them? Is this by mail? Is this a subpoena?
I'll let Dr. Ruppert speak to the delivery of the paperwork.
So my focus at this time, though that can pertain to adults and children, my focus is on the children at this time. Again, they are the recipients of about 84% of the disease of measles that we've seen in this county in these 29 weeks. As far as delivery is concerned, we had our first order that was delivered late on Friday, and I had my staff provide personal delivery service to the parents of the child. And that's how we'll do it going forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Just to clarify one thing, the county executive mentioned a 3,300 contact investigation number. That number is from the case he was citing
Brooklyn,
in
yes.
Brooklyn
Right.
in 2013. That is not here